Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and don't worry, my next part 2 of my Metroid Dread review and my discussion about the ending, the explanation of it, all of my theories that ended up becoming kind of really true, not trying to spoil things, that whole conversation will be coming very soon. But I first wanted to jump into this because just now, this morning, I noticed this news and this update about the Nintendo Switch Online's expansion pass service and the pricing for it, and how apparently this is also tied in with an Animal Crossing Direct that happened. And it's a huge topic, it's a big conversation, everyone's got opinions, they are flying left and right. I've shared even quite a couple myself already this morning on Twitter. And yeah, I kind of want to touch base on this first before I jump into the next part of the Metroid Dread review, because I've got some things to say real quick about it, and I just want to share my perspective on what I see happening. Of course, before we jump any deeper into this very controversial rabbit hole about the Switch Online, expansion pass, price, and all of that stuff, I do always like to remind you guys that I'm always trying to grow the channel here on Rule of Two Review. I upload every single week, and I talk about all things Nintendo, I talk about all things Metroid, and I discuss all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. Obviously, most of us probably know what's going on with this Switch Online expansion pass and the price increase, but I think it's worth covering some of these details, right? And the big thing is, we know that a few weeks ago, they did finally confirm to us that Nintendo 64 games, along with Sega Genesis games, are coming to the Nintendo Switch Online service, which I think is something that most of us have wanted for a long time. Plenty of us have asked for it for a long time, or even expected it for quite a while. It kind of just made sense for them to do so, and you may or may not know, but as an older guy, the Nintendo 64 happens to be my favorite console of all time, based mostly on my nostalgia. Those games don't play the greatest today, and I know that, but I was 16 when that console came out, and it just blew my mind, and so from a nostalgic point of view, as somebody who experienced that console and those games in their relevant time frame, it's my favorite, based on just that history I have with it. So it's really exciting to finally have 64 games coming to the Switch Online service. I also grew up with the Sega Genesis, so I think that's, also fantastic. But the big thing is, when they announced it, they said that these games are coming, N64 and Genesis are coming as part of what they're calling a quote-unquote expansion pass. And while they didn't give us the price at that time, they did confirm that a new pricing structure would come along with these games. And so much has been discussed amongst all of us about how much they might end up charging for this, and what price might be too much, what price might be acceptable. Some folks, very understandably felt that from the get-go, charging any more for the service based on these games still was not okay, because a lot of people just don't even like the service as it exists currently for $20. I've never felt that way. I've personally defended it at the $20 price for a variety of reasons, mostly being the price. And so that's how I felt about it so far. But again, some people didn't even like the fact that they would increase the price without drastically improving every single tiny feature about the service. And so I haven't felt that way, but I know where people have been coming from, and so it's fine. I haven't worried too much about it. Everyone has their own individual thoughts on these things and their own values, and so that made sense. But now, this morning, like I said, they did end up finally confirming the price of the expansion pass. And I'll be real with you guys, I was expecting a lot less than what it is, and at the price I thought it would be, anywhere from $5 to $15, annually of an increase, I was totally prepared to be okay with that and pay that for access to my favorite console of all time. However, the price is a lot more than that, and we are going from $20 a year for the base price to $50 a year for the combined expansion pass online service for the Switch Online. And I gotta tell you guys, I think that's probably way too much. Now, keep in mind, this is all my opinion. Some people may agree with me, some people may disagree with me and think that paying this money is totally fine. And I mean, that's okay. It's everyone's right to feel how they want to about this stuff. And I'll even, admit to you in a somewhat humble way, it's not that I can't afford $50 a year for this. Like, I am fine financially, so it's not about, oh my God, it's outpriced my budget, because it's not about that. I can afford this, like, without even thinking twice about it. But when we just compare the value and what they're asking based on what's being offered, and then you compare it to the competition from Sony and Microsoft, I think the conversation gets tricky when you increase the price by more than double. Because remember, previously, $20 a year to have access to online service, the features, NES and SNES games, and now for $30 more, we've more than doubled the price just to have access to the N64 and Sega Genesis stuff. That's a pretty big price increase. Now, there is another huge element to this that's important to discuss, and I think that my perspective will also be kind of unique on this as well. And it's the fact that this whole thing, this pricing structure and everything going on, was actually wrapped in with the Animal Crossing Direct that happened this morning as well. That's where all this news and the info about the pricing and stuff came from. And most of you guys who know me will know I just happen to not be an Animal Crossing fan. I do love Nintendo and most of their franchises, but Animal Crossing is one of those few that just doesn't appeal to me, and I don't care for it. My fiance loves Animal Crossing, so it definitely gets playtime in our household, but not for me, it's all from her. And so that's fine. I'm glad for her and anyone else who enjoys it. And so an Animal Crossing Direct happened this morning. I was never going to watch it. I'm not interested in it. I just wanted to see how fans would react to what was announced. But again, this whole conversation is because one of the surprises that came out of it was the pricing structure of this online service. And the reason is because alongside of N64 and Sega Genesis games, also this really significant DLC update for Animal Crossing is also included in this online service for the now $50 per year for the individual subscription. And I have to say, I find this pretty interesting, and I can kind of play devil's advocate to myself here and say that at the end of the day, I do think it's a pretty smart business move from Nintendo. And the reason I say that is because when I actually kind of looked into this DLC for Animal Crossing, again, remember, I'm not a fan, I don't play the series, I have no interest in the series, so I didn't even watch the Direct. What I wanted to find out is if this Animal Crossing DLC was otherwise something you could pay for. Like if you didn't subscribe to the service, could you just buy it separately? Or is this update to Animal Crossing only a part of the expansion pass? Was it exclusive to the Nintendo Switch Online paid service thing that we would all do? And the answer is no, it's not. You can buy this DLC separate, and that price for that DLC is $24.99, $25. So it's a pretty significant update in terms of content, it seems, and it's also a significant price, $25 for that. So what happens when I look at that as a non-Animal Crossing fan and someone who thinks $50 a year is too much for this expansion pass? I do see a $25 value DLC being included in a $30 increase to the Nintendo Switch Online service. So it's like, it gets trickier to explain this stuff, but when you break the numbers down, it's like you've got the $20 base service that has online play plus NES and SNES games. Then you have a $30 addition that includes N64 and Sega Genesis games, and then a $25 expansion pass to like their most popular and successful game. So just because I'm part of the 1% of people that doesn't play Animal Crossing, when you consider that 99% of people who have a Switch love and enjoy and play Animal Crossing, and you include $25 value DLC in a $30 increase, it's like, man, does that mean that they're technically only charging $5 for N64 and Genesis games? I mean, in a way, you can kind of break the numbers down in your head and maybe justify it that way. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, this whole breakdown doesn't really make this any more appealing or interesting to me, and it also doesn't really justify the price to me. And again, a huge part of that is because I'm not an Animal Crossing fan. Maybe if I was an Animal Crossing fan, I would see this whole thing as a worthy price, because I'd be like, well, I was already going to pay $25 to get the Animal Crossing DLC, but now I can see for only $30 more, I can get the Animal Crossing DLC, plus I suddenly have access to N64 and Genesis games. And so Animal Crossing fans might have a different perspective. And in fact, I know most of you who watch this video will be Animal Crossing fans, so I would be curious to hear your thoughts on how you think it breaks down. But again, to me, it still doesn't feel right, because I don't think that you can say that this is just $5 for N64 games and then $25 for the DLC. That's just not what they're doing. And one of the many reasons, by the way, for that is because it's not $30 one time to have access to Animal Crossing and the N64 and Genesis games. It's $30 additionally every year. Whereas if you wanted the Animal Crossing DLC, yeah, you'd pay $25, but you'd only do that one time to just have it. Instead, they're giving you regular access to it because you're paying $30 more a year, $50 total, to have access to all of this stuff. And so, I'm torn in the sense that, like I said, the N64, it's my favorite video game console of all time, you guys. I love the fact that these games are being made available on the Switch, and we can use Switch controllers, and it's probably going to be, slightly updated graphics or whatever. I don't really know if they've confirmed if they're made HD or if they're, still the same old resolution. So maybe I'm wrong on that. Don't quote me there. But it's either way, it's just great to have these games. I want to play these games again on my Switch. I don't have my 64 anymore. I sold it when I was I guess I would have been 21. I traded it in to buy my GameCube at the time because the GameCube was brand new, I was younger and more careless with my money, and I didn't make as good money, so I would have to trade in consoles to buy myself new consoles, and I've never bought a 64 since then. And that's regrettable, but it is what it is. I was a younger kid at the time in my 20s, and that's just how I did things. So to have these games come back to the Switch, it's like I want them, but I have to admit, I don't love the price. And again, I'm somebody who was defending the $20 price for the last couple of years, and I still defend the $20 price for the base service. I still think it's worth it at that value. And I'm also somebody who was willing to pay $5 to $15 more annually to have access to this stuff. But they've charged more than double that, $50 for the whole thing. It's tricky. And I think it's also tricky when you realize that at $50 annually, they've now priced themselves basically in direct competition to Sony and Microsoft, who are charging a variety of prices. Sony is like $60 a year for their entire service, including PlayStation Plus and all that, and all the online features. Microsoft has a couple of different breakdowns. Game Pass is pretty expensive, but it gives you a great value, and then there's other Xbox Online things. You're paying $60 a year or $10 a month or whatever you're doing. But at $50 a year for the Switch Online service now, it's in the same market and price competitive situation with Sony and Microsoft. And so when they bring themselves up to that price point and put themselves in the same market now, it's like now the conversation about what they're offering and the prices they're charging and the value for everything changes, because they're now more directly competing with Sony and Microsoft. Again, I've defended $20 a year for the original service because I didn't see it as a direct competition to Sony and Microsoft because of the huge price difference, and that Nintendo was being very gracious with only $20 a year. But that's no longer the case if you choose the expansion pass. And most of us want the expansion pass. So now it's like, yeah, that's why I think it's overpriced. It wasn't overpriced at $20, but at $50, even with this new stuff, to me, it's overpriced because of how it compares to the competition. And so I'll end this by saying one thing here. This is not something that makes me actively mad, okay? I'm not angry or upset because at 41 years old, everything the internet throws at us all the time and everything people get outraged over in the gaming space anymore, man, I just don't have the time or the mental bandwidth to care enough about things like this to be actively upset. I mean, some things might make me upset, like if Nintendo said, hey, we're never making Metroid games again because we don't care. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I would maybe feel upset about that. This whole situation and situations like this, yeah, I don't get mad about them anymore. But what I can still feel is disappointment. And I am disappointed because I love 64 games. I wanted to play them on my Switch. I was willing to give them an additional $10 a year or so to do so. I thought that was going to be fine. Now they've priced it so much more, and I'm not an Animal Crossing fan, so I'm not even going to be getting the advantage of that DLC stuff that they're bundling in with this price. It's just on principle alone, I can admit, yeah, this is too much money. But it's not something that makes me angry, and for the time being, maybe things change down the road, but for the time being, I'm content to just continue paying $20 a year for the current service at what it is, because I've always felt that that's a worthy price for what it offers. That's cool to me. Right now, even with the N64 games, I'm not yet ready to pay an additional $30 a year for it, even though, yes, I can afford it, like I said. I want to stick to my principles on this, man. I was one of the few people willing to say $10 extra is totally fine. Maybe even 15. But they've gone so above and beyond that it's hard for me to see it as worth it just based on the current structure, you know? If they end up adding like GameCube games or, I don't know, TurboGrafx or maybe Wii games, whatever. Let's say they start adding more stuff like GameCube games down the road and they don't increase the price a second time, then I'll be like, yo, I'll pay $30 more a year. I'll pay $50 annually for NES, SNES, N64, Genesis, and GameCube games. I would probably do that. But I don't know if any of us expect them to add GameCube games and not increase the price yet again. Will some of this change whenever they go into the next-gen situation, which I expect them to do in the next year or two? Maybe. So maybe things change with the next-gen console. But based on this current thing, I'm not mad about it. I'm just a little disappointed and let down, and I'm choosing not to pay for it currently, and I'm going to stick to my $20 a year plan for now, because I'm not going to get $30 worth of value off of a couple of N64 games just based on the current situation. So this is my opinion. These are my thoughts. I'm not losing my mind about it. I'm not like, cancel Nintendo, but I do think it's a bit overpriced and they're being a bit greedy with this thing. And it is, you know, it's unfortunate to see. It's disappointing. So these are my thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Are you happy about this? Are you not happy about this? Whatever you think, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.